What's up, Vankers?
Hello, Venkas.
Brian, can we try to play it a little cooler today? Just try to.
Yeah.
We're trying to play cool.
Let's play classy.
Yeah.
Let's play classy. Yeah.
We have a guest here. Basically, we wanted to have a general meeting with this guy that we're going to record. Is essentially what it is, because this guy has a podcast. He's on the other end of the pond. We love him so much. We won't say the name of the podcast because
then we're going to lose all of our listeners. You can do your own research about that.
Yes. But we're a really big fan of his. And we just wanted to pick his brain, ask him about life, because he's been doing it a long time. He's been a fan for a long time, and he's been doing the damn thing with the podcast for a long time. So really, we just wanted to ask his advice not for us, because we don't need it, but for any of you listeners out there who might be new to Formula One and being like, what the fuck am I getting into? Like, what does the rest of my life look like? And he can give us that wisdom and experience because he's been at this a long time. And without further ado, we have Richard Spanners ready.
Well, if you're going to Richard me, do I owe you money? Is it tax day? What, am I in trouble? Normally when I hear Richard, I think it's literally only my wife left that calls me Richard, and I think, oh no, what have I done this time? What seemingly simple task that I thought I as an adult human could do have I somehow inexplicably messed up?
So what do you go by in the house? You don't go by Spanners around the house, do you?
So I try to get my children to call me Papa because I think it's like, it makes me seem wise and Dickensian. So they now know that if they want a better response out of me, when they want something, they're like, Papa, because they know that I'll respond to that better. But it's also ruined it because it's never, Papa, we found loads of Maltesers that you can consume at your leisure. Papa, we fetched you whiskey from the cellar. It's always, can I have money, or are we allowed more screen time?
Right. You like it when they call you Big Papa, is essentially.
I'm looking for something with the suitable amount of reverence that I feel like I've earned in my house. That's all.
So otherwise, what do they call you? when they don't want something from you, what's the term?
We're definitely past the sweet phase where they're like, Daddy. It's now we're definitely into the teenage, like, Dad. Dad, and they're definitely getting into that kind of teenage kind of, they just yell Vankers all the time. Oh no, that's you guys. I have to say, you guys are you're very kind. It's Missed Apex podcast, by the way, if you want to abandon this and go and listen to my show.
We're just gonna
that will be cut. That will be cut.
But you guys, making very kind comments about me and the show pre-show. But you guys are doing something different in the F1 podcast space, and that could be good or bad. It could be like double blown diffuser good, or it could be like the Lotus 2013 or 2014 where they had the different asymmetrical noses and they thought this is genius, and it wasn't, and it didn't work at all. So I'm not saying which one of those two, but at least it's different. I tell you what, you're definitely not the Caterham nose from 2014.
Dude, you're complimenting us, maybe not, but also flexing because all these cars from eras.
Look at me dropping my chassis knowledge for 2014.
Yes, you're dropping all these blown diffusers. I know blown diffusers was Vettel. That's how Vettel got.
Well, actually, blown diffuser was Ross Brawn and his Brawn car in 2009 when they took over from Honda, and then Vettel they came in with Red Bull and did it a bit better, and that's what led to their dominance. Of course, Brawn then became Mercedes, and if you don't know all those references that I just said, then I'm better than you, and I know it.
Well, I think this is what
just recut that so I look smarter.
I feel like we're doing, on some level, I feel like we're doing. I think that this opportunity for you, we're doing you a favor in some way here, because I think that on some level, I feel like, because when we listen to your podcast, you often talk about, like, I don't know, and you bring on these people that you deem is like, you're so much smarter than us, but here you are an absolute expert.
So that is a weird sort of flip-flop in this industry. So I tend to be a generalist when it comes to broadcasting. So I spent the last 2 years hosting a gardening show on BBC local radio, knowing nothing about gardening. But for 2 years, I was able to aim useful questions. But that's all that I was ever doing from 2014, doing F1 podcasting, surrounding myself with, actually, it was bloggers and drivers, coaches, people who understood the racing and the driving. And I would just spend an hour picking their brains and just getting into the dirt. And the amount of time these experts would say, oh, okay, so, trail braking into the corner. Oh, you don't want to get into trail braking. Yes, no, I do. I want to know everything about trail braking. I want to know how the weight of the car transfers through the corner. I want to understand what feeling I'm looking for in my hands with the steering wheel, even with karting. And you go, oh, so when it goes light, that means that I'm understeering. That means I've got no grip. Oh, because I was trying to do more grip, and really more turn. You should be unturning. And you get all this knowledge just from surrounding yourself with experts and just nerding out. And that's where my podcast came from, was just nerding out, asking people stuff. And then you get to pass that knowledge off slightly as your own when you get invited to be the F1 expert on something, and you go, oh yeah, no, I know all about understeer, ask me. And then, yeah. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and I do like the useful idiot role. I do like bringing experts in around me. But when it comes to stuff like this, I'm always very clear. I'm an expert of nothing, but I do have opinions, and I'm willing to yell them.
Hell yeah.
Well, I think that's also part of, I feel like, this is a space for you to let all those opinions fly.
Exactly. Because I feel like when we listen to your podcast, honestly, we feel you holding back a little bit.
Stunted. I'm trying to be a man of the people. But even when I try to be super balanced, and I go, okay, let's make sure
you're never going to please everyone.
Make sure all sides of the argument are at least represented, and then someone on the panel can come down on the safety car was right, the safety car was wrong, Verstappen deliberately landed on Hamilton's head, or it was a complete accident. You can have your varying views, and I try and be at least balanced, at least have the whole argument come out. And what you end up doing is just annoying two sets of people.
Yes.
And each side, if they're in for a fight, and if they're looking for someone to disagree with them, they will definitely find it in what we do on our show. And if they're looking for someone to validate their opinions on a thing, you'll probably find it on the show as well. So it's amazing. It's a nice sign that we get a lot of feedback. And whenever we get loads of internet grief and abuse, I look at the stats, and it's gone up. You get a little spike, and you go,
yeah,
that's because someone's been slating me on Reddit, and then people have come over to find us. So you can really see why people go down the full clickbait thing. Whenever there's anything controversial, you get a huge spike. And it's so tempting to sit there and go, oh, let's drum up fake controversy. And the podcasts that do it, and the news outlets that do it, and they do it because it works. But the temptation is always there. It's like the ring. It's like the one precious ring, isn't it? You're like, ooh, hot takes.
Yeah, but this isn't, but the beauty of this space is it's not politics. There's not going to be a Brexit or an election of a guy that is
things I have no opinion about at all. Ooh.
Right, but the stakes are so low. Who cares if I scream from the mountaintops that I think Ocon absolutely is trash, and he gets getting beaten by every teammate I've seen, and it doesn't make any sense. It's like I feel like Mugatu in Zoolander being like, it's the same look. Does nobody see that? He keeps getting beaten by his teammates, and people get upset, but who cares? And, our cross to bear is that people say that we're DTS fans and that to stick to NASCAR.
How dare you have only found F1 recently? Boo. Should have been watching ages ago.
But I just wish that the insults were new and original. That's what I wish. But then your cross to bear is what? The British bias, probably?
Oh, there's loads. So yeah, we always get accused of, oh, you're more interested in the British drivers. Well, there's 4 British drivers in F1. We have a pretty international panel, got people from Denmark, a couple of guys from Australia, America, people from Canada, even a Holland person as well. But we found the only Dutch Lewis Hamilton fan. So sorry about that. But Denmark, international crew, but loads of Brits on there as well. And I think in sport, there's a default tribal license to follow the local heroes, to follow the local people. Most people will follow their local soccer team or if you're in a state, what sport are you into? Are you into the bouncy ball one or the
football, basketball, baseball?
Yeah,
I'm a Mets fan because my father was it's my
so
my mom's from Queens, so I'm a Mets fan. So I had no choice in the matter.
So in sport, there is that default where you get into the sport, you be a bit tribal, you have a little bit of skin in the game. That's why people like putting a couple of bucks on a game, because it makes you emotionally involved. Look at me translating like you wouldn't know what quid was. But it's getting emotionally involved somehow, and latching onto a driver or a team is a way of being emotionally involved. So yeah, you can follow your home team. I think that's completely normal in sport.
But I think what we've been drawn to, because there is no American, are the personalities, and Spanners. I will say that I think we can be objective, because there is a Jewish driver on the grid, and we don't fuck with him at all. We do not fuck with Lance Stroll at all.
Right.
Okay. So it's like, that would be a layup for us. I mean, he's maybe tough to root for, but I mean, they talk about Colton Herta, and we're like, well, I haven't seen him on Drive to Survive. The jury's out on him. You know what I'm saying? How charming is he? You know,
what are his interviews going to be like on camera? You know,
what's his personality?
It's not a free pass. And actually, I'm not much of a Lando Norris fan. I found all the improv, and look, basically him and Daniel Ricciardo, they're both very entertaining in their own ways. Ricciardo has a very kind of yes and improv style. Lando Norris came in, took it to more of an extreme where every interview was like that. And then we had this horrible, cringe-worthy couple of years of middle-aged presenters trying to jump on every bandwagon and meme that he was involved with. There was one where he said he liked milk or something, and that was like super funny. And a TV program had him and Carlos Sainz driving around trying to spill the least amount of milk. Yeah, exactly. It's gross.
Right. Is that because he said that he liked milk in an interview? Yes, that's why that happened? I was like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, everything he said, naughty words. Everything he said just became a meme, and just like old dudes trying to be funny and bounce off him. And you could see him visibly getting fed up of it, because it would be like that scene in The Simpsons where they're like, go on, do the thing. Every interview was waiting for him to do it. And I think he got himself in a little bit of a tangle and a mess of how his persona is going to shake out. But, to me, he came in as kind of like, he came in as a paid driver. I don't see much likable outside of that stuff. And I don't think that we've seen him fully tested. I think he gets a bit of a free pass. Like Russell did, people assume and have bestowed upon him some greatness that I don't think we've got evidence of yet.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to get into this right now.
Let's get into it. Let's get into
Russell, it. You really, I don't like George Russell. I think he's a bit of a weenie and has a bit of a.
I'm not exactly British bias. I'm not a George Russell fan either.
No. But you're not because you just worship the cult of Lewis. But hold on, it's you. But the thing is, here's the thing. I do not like George Russell. He gives like head boy vibes. If we're talking like British. Right? Doesn't he give that sort of vibe? I mean, you probably know the type better than you definitely know the type.
He's a posh lad, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. He has that Mr. Perfect, Allison Williams and Get Out. Like he's very nice, but in a fake plastic sort of. I get really bad vibes from him.
Corporate.
He's the kid that he's the kid that's like, you forgot to assign homework, Mrs. Applebaum or whatever. And you're like, fuck, we almost didn't have that's the kind of guy that he is. And I can't stand him, but I have to give it to him. And you, in your podcast, you're very reluctant. You're doing all this mental math to like excuse the fact that he is kicking the shit out of Lewis Hamilton this year.
Is he though? Are you going to just look at the points table? Come on, look a little bit.
No. I don't do that because Alonso is losing to Ocon, which your fucking guy keeps bringing up. Your fucking guy. We're going to get into that in a second. Your guy. Yeah, you're just going to look at the points like your fucking otherwise intelligent co-conspirator is like, well, look at the points. Ocon's winning in the points. Alonso's car is blown up 4 times.
So with the old man, with Matt Trumpets on my podcast, look, he's there for the tech analysis. If he wants to be wrong about Ocon, he can be. It was a nightmare when Ocon and Perez were fighting wheel to wheel at Force India. I really felt like Perez had the measure over a race, over racing, thinking a race out, wheel to wheel action. Perez seemed to come out ahead. I think the points reflected that, but Matt would like cherry pick and go, aha. But
what's his damage with Ocon? He's not even French.
It'd be like qualifying sessions where it was 17 degrees to 22 degrees. Ocon always, and you go, oh, okay. But look, people are allowed to fight for the drivers that they like. And
but can you explain? Can you explain why Matt likes him so much?
I don't know. He's kind of old, but in weird, and I think he's losing it. But one thing about people who are like fans, especially of a midfield driver like me with Perez when he was, in obscurity with Force India and Racing Point, is you pay a lot more attention to the driver that you're a fan of. So what seems like excuses with me from Hamilton and why he's losing out to Russell is me kind of picking up on all little things. And then so I will have more detail about that because I'm focusing on it. But then also you have to take into account that I am actively looking for reasons to
confirmation bias.
Yeah, confirmation bias, which is why I always am honest. I like Lewis Hamilton. I'm a fan. Not really a fan of George Russell. Not a fan of Lando Norris yet. Big Sergio Perez fan. So when you listen to my analysis, you can weigh and you can measure that up. I think it's the only honest way to do it. People who sit there and say they're neutral are liars and should go to jail.
Because I looked at it too. Like, I hate George Russell, so I was doing the same thing that you were doing.
All right,
I was doing the same thing that you were doing. I'm like, well, Lewis is testing the car. He's testing the car. He's got a bad back. He's had it. He had a few strategy things not go that way. But then he crashed into Alonso and completely and then I'm like, all right, we're out of excuses here.
Yeah. Do you know what? Do you know what I look at? Do you know what I look at when I'm trying to say, like, who's the driver that you would want to put your money on over the course of a championship? These days in Formula One, it is all about that kind of end of stint race pace and how they're managing the tires into those final stints. So in the olden days, it would all be about who qualified first, and passing was near impossible in Formula One. Qualifying has never been less important in F1. Just look at the absolute roulette table at Monza, the absolute shocker where they took 23 hours to decide who was on pole. And this is it. Ferrari all season, they've been really strong in qualifying, but it hasn't really meant anything because the Red Bulls have been so good on race pace. But Lewis Hamilton is deadly at the end of a first stint. And we've seen it against Vettel. We've seen it against Rosberg. We've seen it against Bottas. And you've just seen, even in very close machinery, you think, oh, he's either holding a gap or he can't catch up with the car in front. Then suddenly we get to 2/3 into that stint and he's got something in reserve. He can do something that no other drivers can do. And that is where he used to embarrass Bottas. So to me, it's kind of the race pace at critical points in the race. By my measure, by me looking at that, Russell is fast. He's doing a good job. He's qualifying well. I think that the gap between Hamilton and Russell overall is probably a bit closer than him and Bottas. But I really do believe Hamilton's got the overall edge. But you can argue, you can say, right, well, who's performed better this season? So does Russell deserve a lead? I think you can make that argument. But I still think if you had to pick one driver now, flip a coin, make a decision. Who's going to challenge Red Bull next season? Who's your number one driver? Go. You would still be mad not to go with Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. What would you attribute that? What is that about that 2/3 of the race? Brilliant. Like, what is it?
It's smoothness. I think it's the ability to go fast without taking more out of the tires than you need to, and doing that consistently. And even Bottas was saying the thing that really gets me with Hamilton is the consistency. It's a brutal, punishing consistency that I can't keep up with.
But there's another aspect that I'm starting to notice in my 10 minutes watching the sport is there's a big IQ-ness to a few of these guys that keeps them in where they maybe shouldn't be in. And that's Sainz, that's Russell, and like Alonso. That they think their way into places that they shouldn't be. And I feel like that has to speak for something. And Lewis gets caught flat-footed on the strategy. He relies on his team more. Leclerc runs into that same problem. These guys who are really fast, but they fall victims to circumstances sort of out of their control because they're less proactive when it comes
so you can see some weaknesses. And look, this is it. I'm a Hamilton fan. I'm not a Hamilton fan that thinks he walks on water. And I think part of being Brian, what was your team from earlier?
The Mets.
The Mets. So like that's the bouncy ball one, isn't it?
No, that's baseball.
Baseball. Okay. Baseball, really?
Yeah.
The diamond shaped cricket. We're
going to talk about boring shit that happens in Europe in a second.
Okay. But I bet you're more critical of the Mets when there's flaws, and this is the problem. I think a lot of Hamilton fans and Verstappen fans fall into is it's like a god complex, and they can never be wrong, and they always have to find a reason. But if you look at Hamilton, there are some areas where he doesn't seem strong. So if you look at just the ergonomics around the system, there's been loads of examples of him making mistakes. So he apparently picked the wrong engine mode recently against Verstappen at Zandvoort
after the safety car, right?
And then obviously Baku with the brake magic.
Yeah.
So he left it in the tire warm up, and there was a brilliant situation in 2015 or 2016. They banned briefly radio communications between the driver and the pit wall, and then they suddenly realized, these cars are way too complex to not get detailed instructions from your engineers. And so Rosberg had a situation where he was in a bad situation. They said, okay, my settings are off. What do I do? The pit wall said, well, we can't tell you. So Rosberg went, okay, I'll just go back to my last position that I was in, and that worked out for him. Hamilton's situation was a little bit harder, and he was like, just tell me what mode I need to be in. And they're like, Lewis, we literally can't tell you. And so he goes, right, well, I'm just going to crank up this button. And they're like, no, don't do that. And he said, look, literally, if you don't tell me what to do, I'm just going to press every button on the wheel, because he was getting really annoyed. And the pit wall will go, no, please don't do that. Please don't do that. And so I think the sense you get, it's not maybe that he's like particularly bad at it or rubbish at the tech, but that's not where he excels. I think if you stripped away all that tech, you would see less of a deficit for Hamilton in that area. So, some drivers have got strengths in some places and weaknesses in others. And if you want to say like the technical, the strategic awareness, other drivers seem to come forward in that area. Vettel, for example, very kind of famously was running the Ferrari strategy from the cockpit, and which now every Ferrari driver just has to do a standard.
He was ahead of his time.
But not so. It's like, no, that's a feature, not a bug. We put our chief strategist in the driver's seat, and then and Alonso always little exploits, and Russell seems to be on it there as well.
He screwed. Right. They told Lewis to pull a Sainz and Russell did the same thing, where they were told to be rear gunners, and they made a command decision to come in.
And he justified it though. He justified it brilliantly. The politicking was amazing, and we see it with George Russell. He seems very, very strong on the PR game, on the media game. If he wasn't an F1 driver, he would be on his way to being a corporate enginering manager at some firm or other. You can see
a Tory politician, maybe.
I'm not getting into that, Matt. I don't have any strong opinions one way or the other.
He loves the Queen a lot.
And what do you feel about that? Could be really good or bad. So that's,
no, he's a company man. I mean, he is a company man. He sleeps in Mercedes sheets. He's dutiful. He's dutiful in that way.
Yes, sir.
Which is something that we don't like about him.
Yeah,
that's an essence of a thing that we kind of like push back on within any of this stuff. It's similar to, like, I mean, the ethos even of like we bringing it back to the cricket with the diamond is that, like, as a Mets fan, there's something about the Yankees are like the pinup. The Yankees are Mercedes. They are you can't have a beard if you're on the Yankees. You're not allowed to have facial hair. And the Mets are a little bit more ragtag. Even that's like the difference in the Yankees and the Red Sox. The Red Sox were like, they were all bearded up. They were gross. And the Yankees are the pinstripes. They're the suit and tie. They're like the Kingsmen, and which is what George Russell is just like embodies, which is ultimately distasteful to someone like me.
He's been trained. He's been trained from birth to come across as well as he comes across, and he does. But that doesn't mean just because he comes across well doesn't mean he might be a really nice bloke.
It rings false to me. That's why I actually like Max, because whatever he is, it seems like, and I like Alonso because their energy is as noxious as it may seem to certain people. It is authentic.
Alonso is my stout and rum. Like, I know it's not good news to have a measure of rum and then have stout as my mixer, but it just goes down so smooth, so lovely. Do I tell people about it? No, sir. Do I have a couple? Yes, I do. That's my Alonso. He's my guilty pleasure as a F1 fan. Yeah.
I guess what the thing I was so curious to know is you sent Jenny a message like, don't ask about your origin story, but don't tell us how to do our show. Thanks. But basically you've been a fan for a long time. And
an F1 fan or a fan of Red Flag? Oh yeah, well, no, F1. Yeah.
Zero, it might be 0 minutes that you've been a fan of F1.
Minus minutes at this point. Here we go. Cool.
But I guess so. I've been into it for a year, a little over a year, and like my girlfriend's like, so this is every weekend you're gonna do this. You know what I'm saying? And it's starting to like dawn on her. And then I started doing the podcasting. And she's like, there's not a race this weekend. I go, yeah, but I still do a podcast, right? You know, it's an off week, but and it's starting to dawn on her that this is just it. That she didn't actually meet me when I was doing like this is like a whole new guy now.
Yeah, it came with the package. When I met my wife, she knew that was part of it. But it's interesting, but you know, being a dad, I've got a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. But early on, when they were babies, it didn't necessarily command, right, leave dad alone for the Grand Prix. It does now because, you know, the podcast has kicked off and stuff like that. But it's had to kind of earn its place in our schedule. And now it's like, okay, who wants to come shopping with mum whilst the Grand Prix is on, so we don't have to listen to dad yell at the TV? And they're like, can you please just try and keep it down if anything happens?
You're screaming at the TV and then they tell you to keep it quiet and then you're like, I'm working.
No, and a little bit like that, right? But also, like, I'll be screaming at like some event that's happened, and I was around her grandparents' house in 2015. No, I think it was 2014, and Rosberg in Spa ended up just leaving his nose in, really cheeky little nibble, and burst Lewis Hamilton's rear tire, and it just felt like the ultimate, like leaving your foot in, like, oh, you've got past me, but if I just sort of spitefully leave my rear wing, my front wing there, you're likely to come off worse than me. That's what it felt like to me at the time. And I expressed that in very clear terms next to her granddad, who looked a bit shocked, but I was like in full sport F1 mode. And so she's like, I'm really sorry. Honestly, he's normally very nice, but not during the Formula One.
When did you first fall in love with Lewis Hamilton? Was it right from the beginning?
When did I become a Lewis Hamilton fan?
Yeah,
right from the beginning, guys. If you were watching it when he first turned up, he was this young hope. He'd really impressed in F2, very aggressive racer, but he was being put in there in a team against two-time world champion Fernando Alonso. So like expectations aren't massive. McLaren weren't like a juggernaut quite at that time. They were a top team, but Fernando Alonso had gone there as the defending, two championships under his belt.
Yeah.
And right from the first few races, he really did seem like, oh, hang on, there's something different here. And he was pulling off overtakes in a little bit of a different way than we'd seen. I think my memory, my old brain is telling me that it was grooved tires at the time. So like reduced grip. The cars looked a little bit more twitchy, and he was just sending it, down the inside of cars. And by race 3 or 4, you go, oh, hang on a minute. Like you have to remember, we'd been relatively starved of like top British talent. We'd had Nigel Mansell, and then Damon Hill. We were all Damon Hill fans briefly, and then Coulthard kind of disappointed a little bit against Hakkinen, and then Ant Davison, who was great but never really made an impression, and then this young lad Jenson Button, who again just seemed like a kind of James Hunt tearaway. Lewis Hamilton came in and suddenly seemed like the real deal, and we went, wow, we've got like a proper British race winner, future champ here. So immediately, Brian,
right.
And I guess the other advice that I want to ask from you is or on behalf of my listeners, obviously, not
hello
for me.
Hi, all of you. Hi, all three of you. I'm only kidding. I know. I've seen your stats.
Yeah. So basically, we kind of like got in at the perfect time. Like we started watching together at Baku, and it was like, oh my god, this is
peak
crack.
drama.
Right, exactly.
Last year.
Last year.
Yeah,
Last year. And then we had the Max at Lewis, just the most insane thing ever. And then I like went back and watched races from the old days, and it's like it obviously wasn't always like that. There was very few overtakes. A lot of the pit stops were like 20 minutes refueling, and it was all about undercuts and overcuts, and I guess so you're very experienced in staying the course when it's boring. So now that we're in a season where everything's sort of settling into how it probably normally is, if I'm not mistaken.
Totally normal. I mean,
how do you see? Last year was this hot fling.
Yeah.
But now we're settled into this boring marriage of Formula One. How do we keep the spark alive when Max is winning by 200 million? Like, how do you consume this sport when it's like
brilliant?
This?
It's a brilliant question. And I always say to people, F1 isn't decided over the course of a Sunday. It's not even decided over a course of a season. It really is like an eras game. And for a driver, you say, well, it's boring because they don't have equal cars. It's just whoever has the best car wins. But it's a career game for the drivers. They come in at Minardi or something like that, like Alonso did, and you get noticed and you do well and you work your way up. You do what Leclerc did. You do your time fighting bums at Sauber, and then you get noticed, and then you go to Ferrari, and that's your shot, and then you watch that crumble heartbreakingly away from you, your best and probably only chance to pick up a title disappear in the most humiliating and devastating of fashions. So it's a career game, and it's done over eras. And so not a single season for me, because I've been watching it since 1986, isn't make or break. And last season, if you jumped in last season and you think F1's going to be like that every single season, it probably isn't. Last season was a culmination of an entire hybrid era of Formula One, where you had to start with Mercedes dominating, but they had these two spicy young drivers with loads of history fighting each other. That was an incredible story for 3 years. 2017, 2018, Ferrari were challenging and fell short, mostly down to Vettel's driving, frankly. And then was what it was. He just kept, if you forgive the 2017 Ferrari, Vettel's errors, that car's right in there in the championship hunt. And then you go, is Bottas going to be another Rosberg? No, unfortunately, no, not at all. So that, a couple of years of domination there, and then this amazing 2021. But we've seen these cycles. I sat through the Schumacher years where he just ruined F1 and turned Ferrari into the Death Star, and Alonso was this breath of fresh air that came in and did something sparkly and different, and Mercedes and Red Bull have all had their periods of domination. But for me, it's this thing of like, a day can go slowly, but the years fly by. So when it comes to Grand Prix day, that 15 minutes watching Martin Brundle awkwardly doing his track walk, speaking to people, but leading all the way up to the formation lap, and then the cars being on the grid and the dun, dun, dun. In that moment, and I know, like I've spoken to my friends about this, there's that heart beating, pounding away in your chest, like you're barely breathing because you just want to know how this start is going to go down. And the start now in F1 isn't indicative of what's definitely going to happen through the race. In the olden days, that was like it. Turn one was everything. And if they didn't get that pass done, they're probably going to be stuck behind Gerhard Berger for 40 laps until that engine used to just blow up all the time. But I still get that feeling every time of that, waiting for the moment of the race to go. And even at Monaco, which I hate and is pointless and I hope disappears, even at Monaco, I can sit there with just the volume up and watch these cars go round, look at and see what the drivers are doing, and just absorb it as like a festival of motorsport. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of new, very welcome fans. Welcome to F1. Please, pull up a chair. You're welcome, but it isn't always going to be 2021 at all. This is a far more normal kind of season.
Right.
Sorry, I spoke for ages there.
No, that was beautiful. That was amazing.
You literally held your heart during most of it.
Do you know what? Right at the beginning of the show, you were talking about like how we care so much about something that it doesn't mean anything, but it's so weird that so much of like my passion and my focus has gone into that, and it's just
who hurt you.
But I'm sure like a lot of people, how do you make sure you get your dad's attention or your mum's attention on a Sunday afternoon Well, they're sat watching the Grand Prix. So that's the time. They're not going anywhere. There's no work. You're definitely going to be there hanging out with them. And then some people kind of, swap out the love of their parent or whatever with the love of Formula One. Who knows the psychological traumas we all go through and why we love sports so much. But it has become this not important thing. And I think that's quite healthy. I think psychologically, it's a great break from the mortgage, trying to pay bills. No, put that down. Why is everything sticky in my house now? How come I've got no time? Oh, I should hang out with my friends. Oh no, they're busy and aren't allowed to do anything either. So yeah, it's become the most important, unimportant thing. I think you said it really well earlier.
For us newer fans, as someone who's been watching for as long as you have, are there certain races, eras, times that we've done stuff on, like, we know about Hamilton and Alonso. We've done a little bit of our research. We've tried to do our research, but like in terms of like, are there certain races that stick out to you being like, this was a fucking amazing race? This was this one, this series of races, this championship battle, this midfield battle. Like, what sticks out to you?
Honestly, it tends to be seasons. Yeah. Like you said, with 2021, 2010, 2012, 2007. Oh God, that still hurts. 2007 with Lewis Hamilton stacking it in the China pit lane, and then Raikkonen out of nowhere suddenly becoming world champion, and then everyone like loving and adoring Raikkonen and treating him like a legend for the next 25 years or however long. It's like, what? Why? No. And then he went to Ferrari. And I thought, all the time he's at Ferrari, I'm like, see, but everyone's like, oh, Kimi's such a legend. No,
there's that
all of 2007,
and then they paid him to leave, and then he came back. I mean, it was like they couldn't quit him.
Yeah, we read his biography, and it was like, what is going on? But we there's that that meme of like the two kids fighting, and then there's a guy like smoking his bong and laughing behind them. That is Raikkonen sneaking in 2007.
There's a chip shop equivalent meme as well, where everyone's being dragged out of the kebab shop, all having a fight, and then there's this one guy like chewing down, being all chill. But yeah, so yes, I do tend to think of it. I think championships are the ones that stick out to me rather than individual races. But I'll give you a spicy hot take when it comes to me looking back at F1 races. I think don't go any further back, and oh gosh, don't email me. Don't go any further back than Coulthard, Hakkinen, and if you must, Schumacher versus Damon Hill. That's the furthest you should bother going back. Before that, it was really, compared to today, quite an amateur sport, and the TV broadcasting wasn't really up to scratch that it is today, of course, that you would expect. It's not the same sport. So it had its own merits at the time. It had its place in history. But if you go back before 94, even to the 80s with Nigel Mansell, that I love and was a fan of, I think there's diminishing returns. Watch Rush, by all means, but don't worry about like sitting and watching a race from the 60s.
It's like when you watch basketball before they let everybody play, and it's just a different vibe, a whole different vibe.
And it's nothing against the guys that were doing it, but they were all but hobbyists. I'm going to get slated for this. But like, compared to modern drivers,
Jackie Stewart was a bum.
Yeah, Jackie Stewart was a bum. Compared something that like I'll like point at Lance Stroll now. Lance Stroll now is probably better than every driver in the 80s, and it doesn't matter what car you put them in.
Whoa, coming in,
put them in any car.
Senna!
Lance Stroll is more prepared. He's got more experience. He's got more Grand Prix miles. He's had better training. He's had Anthony Davison in there giving him infinite miles in a 2-year-old Williams before he even stepped foot in a proper F1 Grand Prix. Like these guys, even the ones that we think aren't great, they're so well prepped because just the whole sport is much better. It's like saying that, would Mike Tyson, well, hang on, heavyweight boxing, that's a really bad example. But, there's...
Well, there's a basketball player, Bob Cousy. Bob Cousy was like the first point guard that kind of did anything related to like a behind the back. Like Bob Cousy did a behind the back pass and like heads rolled.
Yeah, so things that Michael Schumacher did that took the Formula One world by storm are now standard. Like, you can't, be smoking spliffs, and then wake up from a hotel room at 9 a.m, get dragged into a Grand Prix car and expect to win. Only Hulkenberg can do that, and he couldn't quite nail a podium. I'm sure that's the only reason. But yeah, the standards are just
the lights just different.
The
ghost of Hulkenberg.
Oh no,
the ghost of NIKI LAUDA.
I'm having a full electrical failure, but hopefully you can still see me in here.
Yeah, we can still see you. It's still fine.
I guess, but before your whole house falls down, we'll move on from this take. Oh,
no, you got me. I was just trying something.
I was like,
my computer and lights.
We just see NIKI LAUDA in the corner, and it's like,
yeah. Look, the sport in that form in those days, very entertaining, really great. But when people talk about, comparing eras, that's the reason you can't compare the eras, is because the standard is just so much higher now. Even Senna, people don't like it, but even Senna, just statistically, with the amount of participation, the amount of prep, it's unlikely that Senna would have happened to have risen to the top now. It's just because it's that different a sport.
See, this is what I love. You're just completely you're just getting all of your insanity out in this podcast.
And people are gonna incorrectly comment that I'm wrong, but let them bring it.
Hell yes, we are that podcast. I want you to think of that Missed Apex as your spouse, and we're just the mistress that you get to wear out.
Oh yeah, this is so hot. Okay, yeah, all right, yeah. Come on.
So let's get into some more hot takes. I want to get into an argument with you about. See, you bitched about the safety car after Abu Dhabi. You bitched, and you screamed from the mountaintops.
I was very brave.
You were alone. You were alone in that endeavor.
Yes. You screamed from the fucking mountaintops. They fired Saint Michael, and now they followed the rules, and it was the most horrible, boring shit ever. Can I ask you a question, Spanners?
Yes.
When there's a soccer game, when they do a little football kicky thing with their feet, because apparently in Europe you don't know that you have hands. Yeah. I'm doing what you did to our sports. So when a guy gets injured, when a guy it's the World Cup, 89 minutes. A guy gets injured and they can't get him off the field. Do they just say, well, that's the game? No. They tack on injury time and drag him off the field, and then they finish the fucking game. And how no one's figured this out yet is absolutely fucking insane. And the fact that you go on your podcast and you go, well, they followed the rules this time. If they had ended 2021 by the fucking rules,
would have been fine.
That would have been fine.
Been absolutely fine. No, and it would have been completely with present. It would have been a bit disappointing for some people, but that is completely how F1 races do finish, have always finished. If everyone had known in advance that they definitely weren't going to do that, I would have no argument. Because frankly, I just want consistency. If they change the rules completely and just say, okay, it is completely unacceptable to finish under a safety car, I'm like, all right, well, I don't agree.
But how come nobody realized that this was lame as fuck years ago?
Because
I didn't know that was a possibility until 2021. I'm like, this could end under a safety car. I didn't even know that. That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. How did nobody think about this?
Listen here, Matty come lately. No, you're right. How come no one realized it was boring? Yeah, we did. We knew. We football, right? In soccer, we have 0-0 draws all the time, and no one cares. We just then go and have some chips and some beer. That's we have cricket where it lasts for 5 days and then ends in a draw, and no one specifically minds that. It's about the process of the game. You don't always get a spectacular ending, but so be it. So that is when Liberty came in. That was something that I did ask at the time, and I did wonder, would American fans, if they pick it up, would they understand the concept of a draw? And speaking to Kevin Clark on The Ringer, he's like, no, Americans are allergic to a draw. You can't just leave it and just share the honors of the game. Completely fine to us. But you earlier in your rant, where you were so pleased with yourself, Matt, you were so pleased with yourself, you stumbled actually into legitimately my proposal for the safety cars. if a player gets injured, it's the World Cup final, he gets injured, it takes 5 minutes to stretch him off. They add 5 minutes onto the end. Like what they don't do is they don't go, oh, Germany, I know you was 3-0 up, but what we're going to do is we're going to give Moldova 3 goals as well, and it's just next goal wins. That's like the red flag. If you do the red flag, that's next goal wins. It's garbage. It's stupid nonsense.
But you don't have to change the tires.
Lottery.
You don't have to change the tires.
No,
right?
and I think the changing the tires and the stoppages as well, that needs to go. But the idea that you unwittingly had, which is so the safety car is out for 5 laps. The Formula One tanks aren't full. So you just put 5 extra laps in. If there's no late safety car, you need to finish with 5 laps of fuel in Parc Fermé. If there is a late safety car, you just go round and go, oh, okay, we can just use our reserve fuel. Just go again. You just pause. If there's a safety car within X laps of the end of the race, pause the lap count. And then as the safety car's coming in, right, there's 5 laps to go. You've all got enough fuel, go. The disadvantage of that is the guy at the front with a big lead might have used up his tires to get that big lead. Which is why teams like Mercedes spent all the years, even in their most dominant years, they would only pull a gap of about 5 or 6 seconds on people because they didn't unnecessarily use up their tires in case there was a safety car.
Right.
There we go. I think I won that. I know we're not keeping score, but it definitely.
I thought you Europeans were all about the joy of the fucking game or whatever, and now you're
like, it's all about having fun, but it's more fun if you win, which I think I just did. Boom.
Well, yeah, you wanted a slutty little ending to that argument, and we just want slutty little endings to the race. So if it's a red flag, I love a red flag. I mean, this is the American sports fan of me, but I'm like, I want it to be as fair as possible. I think we can all agree that like what happened at the end of Abu Dhabi wasn't fair, but the idea that like this was going to be
say gross injustice. The line broke up. That's not me saying. That's Brian saying.
We can all agree that it wasn't fair, but if to me, and I mean, you've obviously heard this, but if they were able to red flag it, they were both be able to put on the soft tires, and we were able to have in this season of Max dominating at the beginning, Lewis coming back at the end, Lewis having the better car towards the end of the year, and then at this neck and neck championship to come down to one lap where they were both on equal tires. That would have been the just storybook.
Well, they could have had a game of ping pong to settle it. Oh, let's have a game of ping pong.
You know what? I'd watch it.
There we go.
Okay, I'm really curious. If the situation were reversed, do you think you'd be screaming?
It would be deeply unsatisfying. It would be the equivalent of, like you try and pot the black in pool or pot the 8-ball, and then it bounces off 4 cushions and then it sails into the corner, and like your opponent's looking at you going, you mug, what have you done there? And what you don't do is you don't then jump up on the table, whip your top in the air, it's going, whoa, whoa. You know what you do? You go over and you tap the table and you go, good game. And you kind of acknowledge that was a bit uncomfortable and a bit of a fluke. There was one with Monaco, Nico Rosberg, and he really got gifted the win just by a bad strategy call or a bad pit stop from a late safety car. And he celebrated like he'd just taken on Mike Tyson and Channing Tatum in an oily, naked wrestling match and destroyed them both. It's like, no, you got handed it. You're still the winner. You did well enough to take advantage of that lucky situation.
The winner,
but just tap the table and be like, "Yep, good game." And to be fair, like, did Verstappen over celebrate? No. He did come back in with golden boots or whatever. But if that was my driver and driver that I'm a fan of, and that had happened the other way around, I think I would be. Yeah, I'd be sitting there going,
How about when Lewis?
What about last season, eh?
Oh, wait. How about when Lewis put Max into the wall at Silverstone and then was like crowd surfing later?
Put Max into the wall. Behave yourself. Did you see that incident?
He was in hospital, as you Europeans say. He was in hospital.
Lewis was walking. That was the most amped I've ever seen. Lewis was after Silverstone. Yeah. He was like Ricky Bobby in it. Like every day I wake up and I piss excellence. My name is Lewis Hamilton, and I'm here to stay. If you ain't first or last, fuck, suck my dick, Lewis. Suck my dick, Max Verstappen.
I agree. That was Lewis mostly to blame for that. You go, right, who could have done the most to avoid that incident? Well, Hamilton could have been on the brakes more. He could have completely backed out of it, not fought that position. So in that way, that's how I always look at it. Like, who could have avoided it? But the move when the outside car comes in And there's two things that Verstappen did on that corner. A is you squeeze close on the entry. So if you squeeze close on the entry, that's fine. You're allowed to do that, but you have to then allow for the trajectory that the inside car that you're squeezing. Just like with Perez and Russell in the Austrian Grand Prix this season. I think we've seen a few examples of that. If you squeeze the inside car, you've got to kind of adapt for what the inside driver is going to do. Also, if you cut in tight, if you want to squeeze, like there was room on Verstappen's left, he's not obliged to take that room to the left. But in all these situations, same with Perez, it's kind of self-policing. So if you don't leave that inside car enough room, like Hamilton didn't at Spa,
right?
Yeah. Again, your punishment is the fact that you're in, basically you've got a car on the inside of you that is going fast, that wants to be in the same space that you're in. So there's no way that you can go, it wasn't like Schumacher Barrichello where Schumacher's like trying to run Barrichello into the pit wall or the end of the pit lane. It wasn't anything like that. They're both racing and they occupied the same bit of tarmac. Hamilton could have done the most to avoid it. I don't think you can go, we put him in the wall.
All right, we could literally. All right, Matt, that wasn't even your objection. I wasn't even talking about that. I was just saying we're talking about reactions when someone else has a bad day.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
But you just like what? You just took that other point. You're like, he put it to the wall. He doth protest too much over there.
You know what? Okay. You know what, guys? Things are starting to get contentious, and I think that there's some common ground that we can find here, which is that we all.
Maybe with you, Brian.
That none of listen. I'm the peacekeeper here. Okay, Matt comes in hot, and I'm here with a little bit of ginger ale to make the upset stomach not upset anymore. And
okay,
we can all agree on.
I'll ask a question that we'll all agree on. Okay.
Well, I was gonna bring up our least favorite team.
Oh,
phew.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk Ferrari.
Okay.
Because I remember when
have they been twats the whole time or just since we got it?
Yeah, no, the whole time. Don't worry, you're caught up. No, Ferrari, right? They're obviously an institution within F1, but for me, and I think for a lot of people, this will be other teams. For me, Ferrari are the big bad. They are the big pantomime bad guy. Schumacher was, the bad guy there. And I think if you'd have come in the Red Bull era, Vettel could have been your bad guy, because a lot of newer fans don't realize just how arsey Vettel was in his pomp. He was irritating, deliberately so. And then obviously for loads of people, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton would have been the big bad, and they'll have been relieved to see Verstappen come in, and Verstappen's going to be a baddie for a lot of new people as well. But yeah, Ferrari were the big bad. They've always had this kind of privilege within F1. Everyone has said so much just delusion around Ferrari fans, where Ferrari fans think that we're all Ferrari fans. Like they are crazy. They actually are convinced.
Crazy.
The more you protest, the more you really are deep down a Ferrari fan. And they get more money just for being Ferrari.
Yeah,
Well, I remember we felt like pretty early on we were like, wait, fuck Ferrari? Like we were like looking around being like, this sucks, right? And then I remember where's early days, like even before we started like making the podcast, we were listening to yours, and you kind of were talking about you didn't like, and I was like, okay, it's safe. You gave us the room. You gave us the room for us to fly.
Can I defend Ferrari fans as well?
Yes.
The Tifosi and Ferrari fans are some of the best fans in F1, in that they are critical of Ferrari. They're more critical of Ferrari than you and I. And this season, they haven't been sitting there going, no, actually, it was the right decision to just throw 7 races. They've been furious. They're proper sports fans, the Tifosi. Proper sports.
That's actually not even, I actually don't agree with that. A lot of them like blame Charles a lot.
Yeah, no, you're right. They're wankers. Yeah. No, you're right.
A lot of them blame Charles. A lot of them say Ferrari is good. Second place in the Constructors' Championship is nothing to sneeze at. Like they're like,
this is what we get in our comments. This is what we get in our comments when we're pointing out the Matteo Binotto shaped elephant in the room.
I mean, can you explain to me the office politics of why he's like? Because in America, I don't know how like soccer clubs work, football clubs work, but in the United States, he would be gone by now. Like mid-season gone.
And Ferrari used to be like that. they used to just, drop that guillotine very, very quickly, and you get a kind of a revolving door. Binotto seems to be immune to that. And if he was angry week in, week out, it's not good enough. I know where the problem is. The head of that department, I told him work on reliability, and if he just was like, you don't need to blame individuals, but if you're angry that the systems aren't working, then you can see a future, because he's seen the problem. He's admitted there's a problem. He's going for it. But he comes out week in, week out, and he kind of just like, no, it was fine. That was what we were trying to do that. Of course, it's actually really good. Actually, if you think about it, maybe it's your eyes weren't working, and it's just, you go, well, if I was a Ferrari fan, I wouldn't have confidence in Binotto.
Yeah, it speaks to the delusion. It speaks to there's this delusion even within the organization of what's actually happening on track.
Yeah, and where they should be with their budget, with their experience, with their heritage, with two of the best drivers in the sport. They, and all the talent at that team, they should be not happy with second place. It is worth noting that they probably have a disadvantage being an Italian-based team in a predominantly British-based sport, which is, I worked in the defense industry, and we have a lot of shared engineers between defense and F1. So a lot of the engineers get brought up in that kind of engineering space that's all centered around that area where 7 teams are. So if you're in Switzerland and you're in Italy, your pool of people that you can call upon is going to be lower. You're obviously speaking a different language to most of the F1 community. So they've got a disadvantage there, but in every other area, they should be like rinsing.
But Spanners, isn't that by design that they want to keep it Italian? Because
oh yeah, I'm not saying they should move to Milton Keynes unless they love roundabouts.
No, but I'm saying there was an active snap back or reaction after Schumacher. They were like, okay, let's never do that again.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah, let's be staffed and run, by Italians, and that's perfectly there. All I'm saying is that they won't have the same options and free flowing. Not everyone wants to go and live in Maranello. Apparently they love.
But they did in Michael's day, did they not?
That's you're testing my knowledge of the socio-economic travel considerations of 90s engineers. But I will research that and we'll come back.
Well, they just had more of an an international, staff there.
Does Brexit make that harder?
I have no opinions on Brexit one way or the other. If I ever want to work on radio again, I have. She seems lovely.
How come Brits are such snobs about sports, but then when it comes to like in Parliament, it's like lit in there. You guys are like wild.
All I can say is that I respect the work of our democratically elected representatives.
You're living in a Big Brother state, it feels like.
I really do.
Let's
lads, I really do. I would like to work in radio again. So if we could go back to F1, that would be
okay. No.
Blink twice
okay.
if you're okay. Okay, but let's talk about this season. Let's talk a little bit about like what's been going on. Let's talk about.
Wait, can I ask one more general question before we get to the season?
Yeah.
Another thing we can agree about. Can you, in your eloquent way, with your broad base of knowledge, explain to the fans why you think sprint races are the best thing to happen in F1 in years?
I think the most important thing we should do is just devalue Sunday by having an increasing number of point scoring gimmicks throughout the weekend. And we have to remember that people cannot be bored or disinterested or uninvested for even a single second. Now they're talking about points for practice sessions, which means it's not a practice session, is it? It's a point scoring session. Points for qualifying is an absolute travesty. Qualifying is final practice, and it just so happens that it's the final practice that decides the grid. And in the olden days, they just have an hour or whatever it was for final practice, which would decide the grid. No one would even come out. So like most of the time I watched F1, 55 minutes, there'd be an empty track because everyone's like, well, I'm not using up my tires to just grip up the track for other people. And they'd all come out with like 5 minutes to go. So actually this Q3, Q2, Q1 was great. It made Saturday interesting. But then devolving just to sprint races and then the fact that doesn't even set the grid. No, hang on. No, you have your real qualifying, if you like, and that is valueless. Because then you have a grid which can then jumble it up, and then you have points before the race has even started. I don't want to use a slippery slope fallacy, but at the time we said, well, where else will this lead? But now they're saying points for practice. Like
I heard points for quickest pit stop, which is insane. I heard that they want to divvy out a point if you get the quickest pit stop of the race.
So what's the motivation? Stefano Domenicali is a real F1 guy, you know, ex-Ferrari boss, seems to love the sport. So what he must be being driven by metrics. And I've got the feeling there's these metrics people that are going, whenever there's points, all those sessions where we have points, we have an increased TV viewing. And the whole defense from Ross Brawn was the sprint races have more viewing than free practice. It's like, well, yes, because you sort of made me watch that. But actually now, over the course of a family weekend, I have to choose. Do I want to watch real Friday qualifying, which is like the real qualifying, or do I want to watch the sprint race? And I end up just missing the sprint race. And that's not me just throwing my toys out of the pram. It's simple, like parenting logistics. Yeah. Would I rather watch a really rubbish one stint race that barely affects anything, or do I watch the real qualifying on the Friday?
And I guess maybe part of it is like, we're going to Austin in a month, and there is a thing of like, it's a 3-day pass, but it's like, what's there to see on Friday? I guess
there's loads. Oh no, right, there's loads. Okay, so you go there.
What's up with Friday? As a viewer, what's up with Friday? What are we looking for here?
If you're going to the track, Friday's probably the best day to go. You don't want to be on the track on race day. You can just see one corner and then like listen to whatever's happening, or hope that you're in front of a big screen. Like you miss the race, you miss all the tactics. The best spectator thing is like, you know, if you see free practice, you pick the corners, you can watch them going through there, or even like qualifying. I've seen that in real life, and yeah, that was pretty cool. But also the support grid is great. I don't know what the support grid is at COTA, but even like the W Series cars, which are like old European F4 cars, they're great to see in real life. They're throaty, the racing is good. That's a really cool thing to watch. Porsche Super Cup is way better in real life than it is on telly. The telly does nothing for it. And then seeing the Junior Series guys, who are always a bit more, let's say they're trump cards, they've got less columns filled in. So you get a guy that's really fast but can't take a corner, or a guy who's really good at overtaking but doesn't know, like, you know, where the track ends. But you get to see that whole variety on a support ticket, if there's a good support ticket, and then go home and watch the race on telly. That's my plan.
That's some damn good logic.
I'm cheap, and the Silverstone Friday tickets are way cheaper than race tickets.
Right.
So you're like, who cares about the race and qualifying anyway?
Yeah. Who cares that I don't have 300 quid to spend on watching a race car? Oh, that's the olden days. My goodness, no.
I'm like 300 quid. That's what I say. Yeah, you got to hook up. Yeah, you got a sale there.
Silverstone 2013, right? And it's the year where all the tires just start suddenly blowing up. And Mercedes are doing quite well. Lewis Hamilton's first season at Mercedes, he's doing quite well. Red Bull are furious because the tyres don't suit them. They're too floppy. They're ruining their aerodynamic concept. Get to Silverstone, all the tyres blow up, and then Red Bull go, safety issue. We need the old tyres back. Lo and behold, Sebastian Vettel then goes and wins every other race. Bit of a side story, but I was there that race, and you go in, you pay your general admission. But my friend was sick, so I was there on my own, and I found what I thought was a really good spot, and I was leaning on a barrier in front of me. The cars come out for their parade lap, everyone stands up, and people sit on this barrier thing that I was leaning over watching. So I literally couldn't see anything. And this is like 2013, and I had to drop like 120 quid for a grandstand ticket last minute, because it's the only way I was actually going to see even a second of the race. But nowadays it would be completely sold out. You wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
You enjoyed that story, I can tell. Wow. You could have pretended. You go, that was quite interesting. But no, you just looked at me like I was all
right, not every lap could be purple.
That's right.
You got to save your tires.
And that lap was an arse covered in Marmite.
Okay, so Brian, this season?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about this season. I guess let's talk Ricciardo. Ricciardo's on his way out. Do you think this is justified? Do you think, I mean, do you think he's going to be back in the sport? Do you think he deserves to be back in the sport? Do you think that this is an end of an era? Do you think that there's greatness still left in the tank? Do you value the fact that he has not been able to switch up his driving style as other drivers have been able to? Do you buy this excuse? What's your thoughts?
He seems lovely. He's very funny. He's very charming. Clearly got bags of talent. You know, when we're talking about the top trump cards, and you go, okay, there's some drivers that are complete. Is it like Daniel Ricciardo more in the Perez zone? And I'm a big Perez fan. So Perez, you say he's got 10 for strategy, and before this season you'd have said 10 for tire wear, but you go qualifying pace, no, like a 7 on his top trump.
Right.
And if you look at those bars, some drivers are more complete than others. You know, Lance Stroll's probably middling in a bunch of stuff. But if you go consistency, Stroll's pretty high. He's consistent for what he does there. Safety. When do you see Stroll skittling into people? Never. So he can have a 10 on that. That's pretty good. That's why
he doesn't ever check his mirrors. I feel like he does.
He doesn't know. But there was a spate of a few years where he was picking up podiums and results, and it was always the races where other people were flying off track, and he never. So you got to give him credit where it's due, because he never, he was like, oh, nice and steady.
Hungary wasn't
just great, keep swimming, and yeah, podium. So you got this top trump cards, and some are more full than others. Verstappen, Hamilton, maybe Hamilton, technical ergonomics, only 7. When it comes to Ricciardo, maybe he's just not that top level. He's employable. He's charismatic. He's marketable. You could see why Renault wanted him. He beat Ocon, which we've established you don't think is a very high bar.
Shit.
But he did well kind of in that junior program with Toro Rosso. He beat
Vettel.
He looked like, well, right, okay. So did he? Right, yes, of course he did. But he looked good at, say, Toro Rosso, which is AlphaTauri now. And he sort of looked good against Buemi. I think he was up against Buemi one year. But it was kind of like, okay, guys at the beginning of their career in a junior program, comes up against Vettel, who I always thought was overrated in that car. He was up against Webber, who we don't really have a barometer for really how good Webber was, how much that car suited him. I don't think we know the full extent to how much Red Bull favoured Vettel over Webber as well. So I just feel like Vettel was really flattered by those 4 years. Mm-hmm. Then that turbo hybrid era, he's used to winning everything. Suddenly the car's chugging out. I think he got out of the car in testing in 2014 and just left it and just walked out. He was like, this is terrible. Let me know when the car starts working. He's suddenly got a car that doesn't turn anymore, that's got no grip. Ricciardo's come from a Toro Rosso. And I think Ricciardo and then Verstappen in a later year both hit the wall at Monaco because the Red Bull just turned that much more and that much better than the Toro Rosso. So for Ricciardo, that was a huge upgrade. For Vettel, he was just like signing off. And there's conspiracy theories that Vettel had to score under a certain amount of points to get a release clause that would let him go to Ferrari. But okay. So look, that is a bit of a storm in a teacup. And then you just go, well, he never quite looked on pace against Verstappen. Probably did the sensible thing and thought, oh, this is going to be a Webber situation. Goes to Renault. It's a fairly unremarkable couple of years. Yeah, you're right. He beats Ocon. And then this year hasn't gone well. So when's the last time that Daniel Ricciardo looked like a genuine superstar? Probably 2014. That was his last kind of big heavyweight win. So I don't know. Where's the evidence that he just needs this one magical thing to be unlocked? It might be there, but I haven't seen it as a race fan.
So if you're a Gunther Steiner or
100% take him. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Gunther, okay. Instead of Schumacher. Okay. Yeah.
So see, I thought I've softened on Schumacher. Like I really didn't like him. I thought he was overrated.
You need to stick with it. Come on, man.
I'm still out on Schumacher. I'm still out on Schumacher.
But I mean, he's right there with Magnussen now, isn't he?
Again, how I like Magnussen, big fan of Magnussen, love his attitude. What's his top trump card? Magnussen probably does fit into that journeyman category as well. And I think, look, being a good middling, employable pro at the top level of sport is no disgrace. Who do we put in that category? Perez. Again, massive fan of Perez. Probably does fall into that journeyman category. Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Ricciardo, sadly. And I don't think there's no real shame in that. I mean, you and I, we'd take that if we could.
Oh no, 100%. The only sadness is that like in every interview for a few years, Daniel Ricciardo was just like standing in front of cameras saying that he was the fucking greatest thing that's ever existed.
Because he's so popular and people expected and wanted so much of him because he's so charismatic and just like brilliant. Like pick which F1 driver you want to go on holiday with. Ricciardo's pretty high up there. My top pick is Gasly. I'm thinking a Gasly holiday is absolutely banging. I'll be too old for it, to be honest. I'll probably get sleepy. But then pretty high on that list is Ricciardo. You know, you go, there's going to be cigars and poker. There's also going to be some cool late
but
night.
Ricciardo's no spring chicken. I always feel like he's trying to act younger than he is.
How old are you?
We're 31. And Ricciardo's what, 30, 34, 35?
Is he 34? Yeah, no, in that case, yeah. I mean, this was probably his last roll of the dice. Is he really that old? That's cool.
Brian saw him hanging out with George Russell, and I'm like, why are you hanging? George Russell's so much younger than you are.
I was in London, and I saw he and George Russell at the Soho House.
Yeah, okay. I'll definitely Pierre Gasly, 100% then. I'd like to stick with my original answer. That was the question. Do you think Who would you want to go on holiday with?
Yeah. Do you think Gasly's going to Alpine?
Answer that question. You just came in with it, but that's okay.
You wanted to talk about Pierre, so let's talk about Pierre. Do you think he's going to Alpine? Do you think he's going to beat the socks off of Ocon? Do you think that he has any chance at winning a world championship one day?
Which question for I don't think he's going to Alpine because I think Herta's not going to get his super license. So Toro Rosso don't let him go. So that opportunity might just pass him by.
Die.
Yeah, and it does happen. You know, if I said it's a career game. If the right opportunity doesn't come up, it doesn't come up. And better drivers than Pierre Gasly have not had the opportunity to go and fight for a title. Could he? If you put Pierre Gasly in a top car, is there any evidence that we can point to? Well, he had the top car. You know, he had a top car with Verstappen. It didn't work out, but look at that second Red Bull seat. Weber, Gasly, Albon, Perez, all drivers with promise, all drivers who looked ordinary in that second seat. So is the Red Bull second seat really the best barometer?
But what's the if you're Dietrich Mateschitz or whatever his fucking last name is, what is the point of AlphaTauri if you're going to hold on to Gasly? You're never going to promote him. What is if you're promoting Perez from the outside? Like, what is the point of this team?
Well, you can hold Gasly against Perez as a motivator all the time in contract negotiations. As soon as he tries to, up the wages, we go, well, we can just bring Perez in, Gasly in. So there is that. What's the point of running a second team? I don't know their motivation for running a second team, but people criticize their junior program for churning out drivers and leaving them on the scrap heap. It has actually done all right. If you look at the drivers that have come through there, they've got Gasly, who was promoted to the top team. They had Kvyat, who came in and did a run at the top team. They Verstappen, Ricciardo, Vettel, all products of that junior team. And people will still point out, oh yeah, but they got rid of Buemi and Alguersuari. But really, that has been a reasonable and realistic route to the top of F1, going in that Toro Rosso AlphaTauri. So from a driver's point of view, I don't know what old Dieter's thinking. I haven't got his number. I can try. I'll give him a.
But it seems like the faucet's turned off now. Like if I'm 15 right now, am I joining the Red Bull Junior program? Considering that they're hiring Perez, they're looking at Herta.
If you're 15, so you probably want to make your debut in 5 years, so you want to tag on to the end of the Verstappen era. Yeah, well, I think that'd be all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be a Red Bull Junior because that's the junior program where you're most likely to get a junior seat first. There's a history of being promoted as well. The one you'd avoid, I guess, would be the Alpine one.
Okay, let's talk about Piastri. Do you think Piastri's coming in?
I don't know anything about him.
You don't know anything about him? Okay.
No. I should watch more junior series stuff.
Yeah.
A, I don't know anything about him. And B, the amount of drivers that have come in with big reputations from the junior series and they're not delivered in F1 has kind of, in my head over the decades, made me never get excited about these guys coming in until they do something. So everyone's getting really excited about Piastri. They are convinced that he's the real deal. That's great. But I think we've seen it not materialize before.
Sure.
Who is like the biggest blown potential person that ever? Because we have those busts, we call them busts in the USA, where like he's the number one draft pick. Yeah. Sam Bowie, he was picked ahead of Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
That sort of who is like the most highly, if LeBron James didn't pan out, right, he would have been the biggest bust of all time. I guess, who is the biggest F1 bust ever?
I'm going to go with, because I can't right. Analyze the careers of all the slightly unsuccessful drivers who weren't world champions and which one of them had the most potential. The one that actually sticks out in my head, and this is really from being a kid, is Johnny Herbert, the commentator on Sky Sports now.
Oh,
but he
really?
had, like, a big crash, and he had big injuries. I can't remember if his big crash was in F1 or F2. But if you go back far enough, drivers used to do both. They come in, they do F1, they do F2 over seasons. But Johnny Herbert, he had definitely had a big accident that actually it meant that every time he pressed the brake, it would hurt for the rest of his career. But he was really highly rated. He won a race at Silverstone, which was really exciting as a kid. Damon Hill then went on stage with his band and sung "Go Johnny, go go go." And he's always been a great personality. I think he's a really fun, if not the most analytical pundit. So yeah, I'm going to go with Johnny Herbert. You weren't expecting that. What would you say? Oh yeah.
Well, speaking also of that, I'm Kubica comes to mind as well, because I feel like, these are guys that also just had injuries and whatever, but from whatever era that the very recent era, but it feels like Ricciardo's that. Ricciardo was the person who was like, this is a superstar, and then it's just all been down to the bottom. He's gonna get.
And I heard Hulkenberg was pretty highly touted too.
Yeah, but Hulkenberg made a deal with the devil, which is you will be in F1 for decades. You'll be incredibly handsome. You'll have the life that everyone will envy you for, but you will never get a podium. And then he took that deal, and then he never got a podium. Got so close.
That's your expert analysis of that.
That is my expert analysis. But I don't see that. I've never really seen that with Ricciardo personally. But yeah, you do. I don't know. I don't remember. Okay, so for example, with Kubica, there was a lot of retrofitting when he came back. So at the time, I remember obviously people talking about him. He had good results, and when he came back, people were running these replays of, oh, look at him overtaking a bunch of cars. But it's not in F1. So many of the show reels can be explained by a tire differential. Or they were out of sync on the fuel or something like this. They were showing all these show reels of Kubica being godlike. And if you watched back the clips people were sharing, you would go, oh, he was a god. We were robbed of the next huge talent. He was very highly spoken of, and definitely spoken of as a young talent. I do think there was a little bit of filling in the gaps when he came back, because it was such a sad story, and it would have been really romantic if he'd have been able to do it. But if you looked at his driving positions in that Williams when he first came back, you kind of go, oh, that doesn't look. The base of the right hand looked like he was doing well just to keep it on the wheel, right? And he even said, "I'm driving one-handed."
Yeah.
It was never going to happen, but there was a little bit of retrofitting. I think if you could teleport back to that time, I don't think people were quite as visceral about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, before we let you get back to your
heavy
wife,
drinking,
your wife and your that is your real wife, and your podcast that keeps a lid on you. Are there any more insane opinions or takes that you'd like to share with the world?
No, I'm very middle of the road kind of guy. Try and keep it clean. I'm like an everyman. I want to be the broadcaster for everyone. I'll tell you what though. I can promise that I never sit there and go, oh, this will get a lot of likes, or this will kick off. This will make a good social media clip. I'm really passionate about stuff. And if I see something and I think something, I'm very much like the fan in the stands, and I'll shout the thing in the stands like, referee, that was BS. No way. That was terrible. And then I'll go back in the pub and go, oh, actually, I saw the replay. It looked all right. So sometimes the reactions like that my reactions are that of a fan, not like a broadcaster. If you saw Jolyon Palmer doing that on his BBC analysis, you'd go, he probably shouldn't be in that role. But him and Jack Nicholls don't do that. But so yeah, I love to shout from the stands. I love to call it as I see it, and then look at whether I was right or not. And that's the fun of sport. It is part pantomime as well. And as fans, we get to play our part in that. We get to boo and hiss, or cheer and clap.
Love it. So, and I have one last question too. Given, you are a self-proclaimed fan, not necessarily a broadcaster, but in the beginning you spoke of that, this started as you just asking people that knew more than you about bits and pieces of information, and through these years you've been a sponge and you've taken on a lot. What's your favorite piece of F1 knowledge that you've learned through doing this, through talking to people that know more than you?
Okay, this might seem lame. It's the first one that came to my head is why brakes lock when you see the tire smoke. What caused that and what the driver did wrong to get into that situation. And I think so much of the sporting point of view is hidden from the viewer. So like when you see like, oh, just the left tire snatched and locked, or when Nick de Vries had a really strange rear single wheel lockup that you don't tend to see. Like I've not seen like experienced drivers doing that. And it's because he'd made a mistake on his brake bias and he'd done a different switch because he was driving the Aston Martin or something the day before. So when you see those kind of errors and you go, right, what sporting thing did the athlete do to make that happen? Getting an understanding of that, as shallow as it is now, that's what lets me get into the mechanics of the sport. And I think we never see that more than during racing incidents. So like why I instantly leapt to talking about the mechanics of Hamilton versus Verstappen at Silverstone. I love it when there's those incidents. I don't let my panel say, oh, it was just one of those things. It just happened. I love to get into the nuts and bolts of it because that's the sporting core of what we're watching in F1. That is your curveball. That's the ball that looks like it's going too low but then pops back up again. That's your bunt. That's the tactics and the joys of the sport, and getting to learn those things, what the guys are doing in the moment, in those clutch moments, I think you call it in America land. That's the bits of F1 knowledge that I strive for and that I seek out.
So wait, what makes the brakes go like that?
I mean, it's really interesting with the loading and the unloading, and I can directly kind of experience it with all the sim racing stuff we do. Is if you're trying to turn and brake at the same time, you've got different forces acting on the different wheels. So obviously it's different in every situation. But when you learn karting for the first time, they always say to you, brake in a straight line, because the second you try and introduce brake and steering at the same time, you do one too much or one too little over the other, and the car starts spinning. And it's the same with the way the brakes react to the drivers as well. So it's all about that balance between so there's lots of stories about Lewis Hamilton being last to the late breakers, and braking late and hard is like super sexy. But talking to real race drivers and doing sim racing and karting, a lot of the times the fastest way through the corner isn't stamping on the brakes and getting all the speed off. It's getting on the brakes gradually and managing where that weight goes so that you've got the weight on the correct tire for the most grip, and stuff like that is it's way more fascinating than the safety car, which, obviously we're like a good rant about it.
Love it. Anything else, Matt?
No, this was a joy.
Yeah, this
for
was
me.
That's nice.
No,
you've been agitated and angry the entire time.
Yeah, but that's what we like.
That's
the state of mind that we enjoy.
And that's not just Ferrari justification.
Oh,
like,
no.
It was meant to be argumentative, expressy.
No, we have to send out PSAs about that to the uninformed.
I get more angry when I throw a piece of meat in there and they don't bite.
Yes, yeah.
That is. It's like, why did you even come on the pod? Why did you even come onto the podcast? Oh, when I tried to
tell us what you think about fishing sanctions. That's what you're trying to tell me. What you think of the EU fishing policy? I'm like, no, you'll never get that information out of me.
Well, this has been a joy. We will plug the pod. Go listen to Missed Apex. When do you guys when do the shows come out? When you guys do live streams on YouTube, and then
we go live on 8 p.m. UK time on a Sunday, and I think we're still the first independent podcast that goes live, but now all these big networks have come in and they're all doing F1 pods.
Oh we'll see how those go. But and if I may, you might be wrong, but they're first.
What did you
How
give
was
me?
that? How was
why
that?
did you give me an Australian/Irish accent? What was
We
that?
might be wrong.
Pretty good.
But we're
Oh,
first.
you're another thing you're wrong about.
Well,
Welcome
typically on
to-
this show, we end with a goodbye, Vankers. Would you honor us to join us with that?
Yeah, goodbye, Vankers.
Goodbye, Vankers.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
Vanka.
That was a good one. You lingered on it.
Smashed it.